America's plan to return to the moon just ran into something that no budget cut, no political fight, and no bureaucratic delay could have caused. 20 seconds of fire on a Florida launch pad. On the evening of May 28, 2026, a rocket called New Glenn, Blue Origin's heavy lifter, the machine Jeff Bezos has spent over a decade and billions of dollars building, detonated on its own pad during a routine ground test. Not a launch, not even a flight. A test. The kind rocket companies run all the time. And the timing of it is what turns one company's worst night into a crisis for the entire country's moon program. Because 10 days from now, NASA is walking 4 astronauts onto a stage and announcing their names to the world. 4 people assigned to fly to the moon on a mission called Artemis III. The explosion on May 28th may have just knocked one of the 2 legs out from under that mission. Here's what actually happened, and why the word people are quietly using right now is one nobody wanted to say out loud. Delay, not months, possibly years. Start with the rocket itself, because the scale of what just burned matters. New Glenn is not a small machine. It stands taller than a 30-story building. At its base, 7 engines called BE-4s. When all 7 fire together, they produce roughly 4.1 million pounds of thrust. That number means nothing until you anchor it. So here it is anchored. That is enough force to lift the equivalent of 600 fully loaded Ford F-150 pickup trucks straight off the ground, all at once, and keep pushing. That much power lives about 1 bad valve away from a bomb at all times. On the night of May 28th, something at or near the base of the rocket let go just as those 7 engines were lighting. The blast was visible across a wide stretch of central Florida. People miles away felt their houses shake, windows rattled, a column of fire rolled into the night sky with chunks of debris arcing in every direction. There is video, and it is genuinely hard to watch if you know what you're looking at. Because you're not watching a controlled test anymore. You're watching years of work come apart in real time. Here is the one piece of good news, and I'm not going to bury it. Nobody died, nobody was hurt. The pad had been cleared. The rocket wasn't carrying its payload, 48 internet satellites that were supposed to launch in early June. Those survived in a warehouse. The human cost was 0. Hold on to that, because almost everything else about this story gets darker from here. So why does one rocket blowing up on the ground reach all the way to 4 astronauts and a moon mission? To understand that, you have to understand how Artemis III is actually built. Because it is stranger than most people realize. When you picture going back to the moon, you probably picture one giant rocket. Everything launches together, flies as a single stack, lands on the surface. Apollo, clean, simple. That is not how this works anymore. Artemis III is more like a relay race run by rivals. NASA launches its own rocket, the Space Launch System, carrying a capsule called Orion with the crew inside. Orion goes into orbit, but Orion cannot land on the moon by itself. It is a capsule, not a lander. So separately, on a completely different rocket, a lunar lander has to be launched up to meet it in orbit. The crew transfers over, rides the lander down to the surface, rides it back up. And NASA, in a decision that tells you everything about how nervous they are, decided not to bet on one lander. They lined up 2, one built by SpaceX, one built by Blue Origin. The idea was competition baked right into the mission. Bring both landers to Earth orbit, test them, and let the best ship win. A safety net. If one company stumbled, the other could carry the mission. That was the plan. And on the night of May 28th, the safety net caught fire. Before we get to what the explosion actually broke, it's worth pausing on what these landers are, because they are nothing like the cramped little Apollo lander your grandparents watched on television. That old machine was barely taller than a man with his arm raised. Blue Origin's lander, called Blue Moon, stands 52 feet tall, roughly the height of a 5-story building, designed to carry 4 astronauts and keep them alive on the lunar surface for up to 30 days. SpaceX's lander is in another category entirely. It is a version of Starship, standing around 170 feet tall. Take a football field, stand it straight up on its end. That is roughly the machine they want to lower onto the moon. We are not talking about a lander. We are talking about landing a skyscraper. That was the dream. 2 giants. either one capable of carrying Americans back to the surface for the first time since 1972, and one of them just lost its ride to space. Because Blue Origin's lander doesn't fly to orbit on its own, it rides up on top of New Glenn, the exact rocket that just turned into a fireball on the launch pad. No working New Glenn means no blue moon. It is that direct. The lander could be sitting in a clean room right now, polished, complete, ready to go. And it would not matter, because the thing that carries it to orbit is a charred pile of metal in Florida. Here is the detail that turns this from a headline into something that actually stings. The crew cabin for Blue Origin's lander, the actual pressurized section where astronauts would sit on the way to the lunar surface, already exists as a full-scale mock-up at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. It arrived weeks ago. Astronauts have been climbing inside it, practicing, running simulations, getting their bodies used to the space they would live in on the way down to the moon. The training was already happening, the hardware was real enough to rehearse in, and now the rocket that carries the real version of that cabin to orbit is gone. That would be survivable, genuinely survivable, if the other leg of the mission was standing strong. It isn't. The SpaceX Starship lander is grounded too. The company has been flight testing newer versions of the rocket, and the most recent run hit engine problems. SpaceX is very good at recovering from this kind of thing, faster than anyone in the business. But the specific moon landing variant NASA needs has never flown a mission. Not once. And it carries a complication most people never hear about. That giant Starship lander is too heavy to fly straight to the moon on a single tank of fuel. To make the trip, SpaceX has to launch it into orbit nearly empty, then send up a series of separate tanker flights to fill it back up in space, one after another, like meeting a fuel truck on the side of a highway, except the highway is orbit and the truck is another rocket. That refueling in space has never been done at this scale. Not once, by anyone. Sit with the shape of that for a second. NASA's plan to put Americans back on the moon depends on two landers. One can't get off the ground because its rocket just exploded. The other is grounded, has never flown the version that's actually needed, and depends on a fuel technique nobody has mastered. Both safety nets, full of holes at the exact same moment. Here's where it helps to look backwards, because we have lived through almost exactly this before, and the history is not comforting. September 1st, 2016. A SpaceX Falcon 9 sat on Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral, a stone's throw from where New Glenn just blew up, being fueled for a hot fire test. The same kind of test. It exploded, destroyed the rocket, a $200 million satellite sitting on top, and badly damaged the pad. SpaceX got back to flying rockets in about 4 months. Getting Pad 40 back to full operational status took nearly 15 months, over a year, just to repair the concrete, steel, and plumbing that a single explosion tore apart. Now here is the difference. When SpaceX lost Pad 40, they had other pads. One at Kennedy Space Center right next door, another in California. They kept flying while they rebuilt. They had somewhere else to go. Blue Origin does not. Launch Complex 36 is their only operational New Glenn pad. There is no backup sitting ready next door. There are plans for a second pad at the Cape and another in California. But those are blueprints. Nothing you can launch a rocket from. If the pad damage from this explosion is anything like what SpaceX faced in 2016, you are potentially looking at a year or more before Blue Origin flies New Glenn again with no alternate site to keep things moving in the meantime. And early helicopter footage from the morning after showed the main launch tower took structural damage near the base. The lightning tower next to the pad, destroyed. The transporter erector that hauls the rocket out and stands it upright, gone. A mangled, charred heap in the daylight. The expensive, slow things to fix are the ones hidden underground. Fuel tanks, feed lines, water suppression systems. Nobody knows yet how bad it is down there. And until Blue Origin finishes the investigation, nobody can. So now you can do the brutal arithmetic. If Blue Moon can't fly for many months, maybe not until late 2027, and if Starship's lander still isn't proven, NASA is left with a small menu of bad options. Option 1. Delay Artemis III. Push it from its current target into 2028. which shoves the actual boots on the moon landing flights out to 2029. Option 2, strip the mission down. Fly Artemis III next year with only the SpaceX lander. Bet everything on one company and a vehicle that hasn't flown the mission. No backup, no second ship. The exact opposite of the careful two-lander plan they spent years building. Neither of those is the mission anyone signed up for. And there's one more ripple worth understanding. Those 7 BE-4 engines at the base of New Glenn, Blue Origin doesn't only use them in their own rocket. They sell them to United Launch Alliance, who bolts those same engines onto a rocket called Falcon. If the investigation points the finger at the BE-4 engine itself, the damage doesn't stop with Blue Origin. It could ground a second completely separate rocket made by a completely different company. One bad engine design, 2 grounded rockets, and a moon program leaning harder than ever on the one company that's left. The hardware can be rebuilt. Bezos has the money, the engineers, and the stubbornness. Nobody serious doubts Blue Origin comes back. The thing you cannot rebuild, the thing that is actually gone, is time. And time is the one resource a moon program cannot manufacture. This failure hit the one company with only one pad, at the one moment when the other lander was already grounded, 10 days before 4 astronauts get their names called in front of the world. Every cushion that was supposed to absorb a blow like this had already been spent. We have been telling ourselves we're going back to the moon next year. After the night of May 28th, that sentence got a lot harder to say with a straight face. The 4 astronauts will still get their names called on June 9th. They'll still smile, they'll still be heroes. They just might not know, standing up there on that stage, exactly how long the wait is going to be. And right now, neither does anyone else. So here's what I want to know. NASA had 2 landers as a safety net, and both are now compromised at the same time. If you were running the Artemis program right now, which option would you choose? Delay until both landers are ready, or fly next year with just SpaceX and hope for the best? Drop your answer below. I read everyone. And if you want to understand why China landing on the moon before America would change everything, not just symbolically but strategically, that video is up next.